Welcome to Command Shift Left, the podcast that helps you navigate the treacherous waters of the software development, ops, and security world while also diving into the hot current trends in the industry. Join myself, developer Philip, our co-host Orvice.
Hey audience!
As we battle through hilarious real-world stories, pro tips and hacks for navigating your way around developer security, learning about our Shift Left life, and life stories that have saved our ass. As always, it's an absolute pleasure to have two guests on the show with us today. We have Alex and James, and in no particular order. Alex, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Alex Debris. I'm an independent consultant. I work a lot with AWS and serverless technologies, DynamoDB. I wrote a book on DynamoDB, so that's probably where
Cool.
I'm most known for.
And James?
Yeah, I'm James Perkins. I am a senior developer advocate at clerk.dev, which is an authentication and user management product. I'm also known for YouTube, Twitch live streaming, building SaaSes, and a bunch of other stuff. So you've probably heard my name somewhere around the space.
Oh, you were that guy.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one.
Perfect.
Well, it's fantastic to have you guys on this podcast with us today. And I think we can start off with our first fact. And I'm pretty sure Alex has something interesting to tell us.
Awesome. Yeah. So mine isn't super dev focused, but my fact today is that Warren Buffett earned almost 97% of his wealth after age 60. So I wanted to get kind of a personal fact. Warren Buffett, if people don't know, he's kind of a famous investor. He's actually from Omaha, Nebraska, which is where I'm from. So not a lot of stuff coming out of Omaha, but he's been there. You know, he's been the world's richest person in the world before. I think he's now down to 5th or 6th or something like that. But now he's currently worth 110 billion, but he had, just a mere 4 billion when he was 59 years old. So,
so in a whole year, or I mean, just only a year, right?
No. So now he's 90. So he's had 30 years since then to keep building this up. But yeah, it's kind of amazing. Like most people are kind of winding down maybe at 60, think I'm going to go hit the golf course or the beach or something like that. And he was really just getting started. So I thought it was interesting to see like the importance of persistence and compounding and how growth can sort of happen that way.
Yeah. Einstein said that compound interest is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. Another thing that I like about Warren Buffett is his cute bromance with Bill Gates. As much as billionaires can be cute, I don't know, is that fair? But they're like very lovey-dovey. They give each other advice. They go on dinner dates.
Of course.
I'd love to have a friend like them. Also, especially if they're paying for all those dates.
They play bridge together, all kinds of fun stuff. Yeah, sometimes Bill Gates comes to Omaha and visits him. So yeah, it's a good time.
When they play bridge, it's literally they build the bridge, like the Golden Gate or something.
You can build the fanciest bridge. Yep.
So I guess he's a frequent visitor in your town. Is that right?
Well, so Warren Buffett is from Omaha originally. He has his original house that he bought here 60 years ago. He still has that house.
Yeah.
And he sort of maintains that image of hey, I'm just from Omaha. But I think he also spends a lot of time outside Omaha, maybe where it's better weather or better amenities around as well.
Well, of course he does in his many houses, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So as developers, we often face the challenge of where we want to head with our careers. Everyone's always thinking, how long am I going to be an IC, an individual contributor? Should I go into management? Should I be an architect? How do I get this career kind of accelerating for me? And obviously there's what's happening on let's call it the dark side. All of these investors just having their money compounding. So sometimes it feels like you're working at the sweat of your brow to get every little dollar that you can. So you're being paid well, but it doesn't scale with your age as much as things like what Warren Buffett did. I think everyone around this call has went through interesting and relevant career paths as engineers. Maybe you can share a little bit about that. How do you get yourself how are you fulfilled, and how do you make economical sense of your careers?
I can go first. I actually had a weird career path. I went to law school and I was a lawyer for a year before I became a computer programmer. I basically taught myself to code while I was in law school and worked as a lawyer for a year. It was fine. I liked it, but I liked doing the programming more, so made a big switch there. And then 3 years ago, I went on my own and started doing consulting and things like that. And I just I like having control over what I want to do, what my time is, and like the work I work on and just the quality I want to have with it. I think, if you get into a bigger company, you get people that don't care or aren't as invested in the work, and that's kind of tough for me. So I want to own my stuff and own my output and all that. So that's how I thought.
And at what point did you actually realize that coding was the thing that you wanted to do? Because I remember the first time I saw a line of code, I was quite frankly almost disgusted by the way it looked.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to touch that ever again until I actually ended up later on trying to become a doctor. And then I was like, wait, this is definitely not my career path. So I was like, maybe I need to go back to the previous one.
Nothing is disgusting when you're learning medicine. There's no disgusting things there at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I don't, for me, it was kind of the same thing. I was always on the computer growing up and like sort of fixing it, but not programming that much. But then in college, I took one programming class or a computer science class thinking I would like it. It was just the worst class I took. We didn't write any code. We sort of did for loops and logic, but written out by hand in a notebook, for the test. And it's just it was just horrible. And it's why wouldn't you have people build something on the web as the intro to computer science class and get people fired up about it? But instead I'm just writing logic and learning about bits and bytes and stuff in my notebook. And I just thought it was horrible.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. What about you, James? Have you had the same kind of approach when you started to learn what coding is?
Yeah, so I think I grew up with the whole had a computer in my house when I was I think I was 7 or 8, so I was kind of young and it was Windows 3.1 and 95 because I'm really old. And my dad got it for free from his workplace, so that's how we acquired it because we didn't have any money, but that was how he got it. He used to work for a pharmaceutical company and they were recycling them, so we got one. So I was always with a computer at some point in my life. Then when I went to high school in America, I guess that's what you call it, or secondary school if you're from the UK, I was in a technology school. So they were one of the pioneering kind of technology schools. So you had two options. You could go into a laptop class. So all your classes were on laptops, or you could just do standard school and that was your thing.
All right.
And so luckily I got that privilege because my grandma was like, oh, you should do that. Let me give you the money to do this. Because you had to provide your own laptop. So it was ridiculous amount of money back then because laptops were hella expensive. And then when I first started to learn to code, I hated it. It was something I was like, I think I'm going to do this. I want to do this as a job. And then I started and was like, I hate it and didn't touch it from, I think I was 14. I didn't start again until I was 17 or something. So I was 3 years had passed. And then I was like, oh, actually, this is kind of cool. And then the rest is history. Self-taught, and then went to university later on when I was already in a job as a software engineer when, the attitude was still, you need a degree, otherwise you'll be a junior for the rest of your life. Which is not true. And no one's ever asked for my degree or looked at my degree. So that was a waste of time.
It's true. What about you, Or?
It's true that it's not true.
Yeah, exactly.
I started with basically working with computers at the age of 5. I was very lucky. My sister convinced my parents to buy me a computer. Also, it wasn't even Windows. It was just DOS, and I had to learn both English and writing commands on DOS and VB. Because that was the only way that I could operate that machine. There wasn't any other option. So I think that kind of gave me a leg up. And my career really became a career when I joined the intelligence corps, the IDF. It took me from a snotty-nosed kid that knows some programming to an actual engineer. I remember though, like in the interim period in school, like when like in middle school, mid-high, I don't know what you call it, wherever you're, like in the UK or US, but I remember being confused, like in math class, like, okay, so she's defining like a variable named X, but what is its type? How is it? And also in geometry, like, how is this going to be parsed? I was literally confused by that because I had these different boxes in my mind. Maybe you shouldn't have so early on. And speeding forward, I really tried to push my career forward as an engineer. I kind of realized that if I want to focus on the projects that I want, I also have to become an entrepreneur. And now I'm kind of hooked on that. I'm starting to create too many startups at this point. I should probably go to like startup rehab or something like that. And if I really found something interesting in what you said, like having laptop, James, in like having laptop school versus regular school. I'm kind of starting to wonder if like, is there going to be like cloud school or ChatGPT based school, like in a couple of years from now? Like, oh, we don't write any essays here. You just communicate chat agent, and that's how we do learning at the school. I don't know. I think we'll be seeing a lot of weird things. Well, things that will be normal soon, but from our ancient perspectives, maybe weird.
Yeah.
Anti-chat GPT bots essentially being implemented into every lesson.
Yeah.
Just to make sure, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe the chat GPT would be the students that, and like as where you go to school, you just go to train models. That's your purpose. We'll see. I think, Philip, correct me if I'm wrong. I think this would be a good point in time to move to the next fact.
I think this is the fantastic time, and I believe you are next.
True. So my fact for this episode is that birds in a flock fly recursively. So when you think about writing recursive code in your application, you probably know that it's probably one of the easiest tools to kind of build complex patterns into your application without actually thinking them through. And so, or thinking them completely through. And there's this kind of recursive mindset that developers develop. So birds have something very similar. So think about it. You have a huge flock of birds, depending on the species, that it can be like a few dozen birds, and it can be like even hundreds of birds flying in unison, in formation, in the clouds, and they're able to move long distances that way. And initially it wasn't clear how they do it. Like, is there like one bird giving commands to everyone how to fly? Each bird navigates its own path, but it does so recursively by looking at the other birds and looking where they are flying. And so it has recursive code that reacts to that. And they're also looking recursively at the overall trajectory and trend. So essentially each bird is calculating the flight path of the entire flock, and it's just cascading through those birds. And I think that's amazing. You literally see the same patterns.
And they're stuck in an infinite loop, and at one point they know how to exit that, right?
So they have halting conditions and exit conditions, just like the recursive code you'd write. Like if you were at the edge, you'll be making different decisions. If you're at the wedge part of the flock, you'll be making different decisions. But everything, as it works, is recursive. And I find that in general, most things in life, most complex things that we see in life are recursive. So how cells divide, for example, is a recursive pattern. And there's, by the way, there's a specific halting condition there. Like the cells check if they're within a specific tissue, and according to that, they continue to multiply or not.
I didn't know
that.
And
that's also how markets work. So currently now, we're maybe not in a recession, and you can literally see the cascading effect. So you have like VCs, you have like the banks slowing down and increasing interest. You can see the VCs and LPs pulling the money. You can see the companies starting to stress. And now if you look at the time of recording, you can see that the recruitment agency. So now, for example, I'm constantly getting emails from recruitment agencies like, hey, we've got people. Do you want to hire people? because that cascading effect has recursively trickled down into that part of the market. And in general, I have a saying that I like. I like to say that the best things in life start with recursion, which starts with the best things in life.
Yeah,
I like it.
That's
good.
that's my 2 cents.
Spam emails I also find that are slightly recursive. As much as you try and cancel them, they still come back. It's quite amazing, actually.
When you're trying to cancel one spam email, you're using another tool to help you manage that email, and that starts to spam you. I actually had a situation where I already said that I'm in a weird predicament where I've started too many companies. I actually had a situation where I got spam email in one company from another company that I founded. So my own company was spamming me in my new position.
I saw something very similar today, which was that the team over at Sanity was sending out emails to say, hey, have you tried Sanity? It was like from their DevRel team. And they sent it to the CEO of Sanity, because obviously he signed up at some point with his own the Sanity email. So they sent him an email like, Sanity's really cool, and like, you should check it out. And they were like, oh, you're the CEO. Oops. So yeah. Good
I
stuff.
hope you replied, I'm unconvinced. Can you share more about the...
Sell me on this
how
product.
about discounts?
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
I was gonna ask, when you got that email from your past startup, did you unsubscribe?
I didn't unsubscribe, but I did write back to them that like, A, I'm probably not your target audience, and B, why spam people? This is not what I wanted for this company when I started it. But that's another thing with recursion, like, or in general, with like you start things and they get a life of their own. They just continue to iterate.
Yeah.
And unless you go and you debug every little aspect of it, which can take a while, you maybe need to kind of accept that lack of control that comes with recursive things.
So say with startups, right? Like the recursion of a startup, usually you build a startup because you have a problem, and then you end up building the platform that solves the problem. And then you sell that platform using your platform to other people. and that's how it works. Like auth providers will build the authentication, then use their own authentication as the platform to then serve all of the customers that they have, which is basically what we do at Clark.
Yeah, we have a very similar problem at Permit. Like there's a lot of recursive and very complex challenges with both authorization for authorization.
Yep.
And the how do you maintain the audit logs for that? So we have like meta audit logs. So just explaining these concepts can be kind of confusing for people. And also it kind of puts us in kind of weird situations. Like we provide a full ready-made audit log screen, but we don't have an audit log screen yet for our own meta audit log. And we enable our customers to create dynamic roles on the fly, but we don't have dynamic roles. So every time I have to say, yes, it's a very challenging recursive problem. We are aware of.
Yeah, we just got to wait until the time when it's the authorization for authorization for authorization. That's...
No, I'm stopping it at one level. I can't.
All right. I think with that positive ending, I think it's time to move on to our third fact. And I know James has something cool to tell us.
Yeah, so my fact is MUMPS, which people know as the viral infection, is also a database that was used in the 60s and invented by the Massachusetts hospital.
Oh.
And it was the first production database I ever wrote code to, and it was the first time I'd ever interacted with a database, and that was my introduction to production code. And if people at home are wondering how, do you have like a nice GUI? How does that work? No, it's in a terminal. And if you mess up, you can delete the whole production database because there's no real backups. The way you backed up was to literally copy the file and put it in another directory and then make the changes in production while people were using it. Hope that no one managed to lock the database while you were doing whatever migration you had to do. and it has like it's basically key pair values, like just imagine JSON, massive key pair value. That's the database. Yeah, and that was my first.
So kind of like Redis.
But worse.
But crappy.
But way worse.
And it's still used today. Like they're still used in
Really?
hospitals. Yep, still used in hospitals.
Hospitals?
Yeah, yep, because
Like, are most hospitals on it, or like how widely used is this?
Oh, it's probably not as widely used as it used to be. Like they stopped shipping code in the 90s, so like there hasn't been a production release since the 90s. But to give people, I'm not.
To me, it just rings like it has a lot of vulnerabilities. Like
Yep. So
Okay,
I'm
cool.
not that old. I'm in my 30s. So just to give people an idea, I'm in my mid 30s. But I first touched this production code in 2009.
Whoa.
People were still using it in 2009, and it was still being used when I left that company 7 years later. So it's definitely still being used today. If you Google MUMPS database, you can look at the like 20 commands that you can use, because there's only 20 commands you can use. And getting data out of it was almost like we had one guy where you'd have to go and ask him, and it would just print out in the command, and you'd have to copy it and put it in a text file and then read what you needed out of it. It's a wild time.
And give us a sense of like what kind of scale was that database running at this hospital?
It ran the whole state of New Jersey's DMV.
what?
So yeah, it's pretty big. Yeah, pretty big.
I find it fascinating that you're still saying that a hospital is using this when you can so easily lose all the data.
Yeah.
What kind of maniac is essentially deciding on this?
So
Well-
I can understand why like a bank would stick with something like a mainframe and COBOL, because it's really hard to migrate from that. But you're talking about a database. Why not just copy off the data into something that is not stupid, or less stupid at least?
Something with like security checks and easy migrations and easy scalability, all those things that you need when you're running like, millions of rows of data, instead of just a giant file that you have to compress once in a while because it's way too big.
So is it like a job security thing? There's like this person in New Jersey that is really good with this MUMPS thing.
I know 10 people in my whole career that have written even a line with MUMPS. So, and I happen to be one of them. So there's only 9 other people I know. So hopefully at some point it'll be completely obsolete and never be used again, and it can just perish into some sort of wiki that no one ever looks at. But yeah, it's still being used. It's wild.
MUMPS,
Crazy.
it'll outlast
Crazy.
all of us.
Yeah.
It'll be running until the end.
There you go. See, don't migrate if it's not broken. Maybe that's the theory. Here.
I suppose.
That's
I'm
a
still
scary
running
theory.
things on Windows 3.11 just because I can.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I wonder, like when you were working on this, did you have like the thought of, we should replace this, and you get like pushback on, or it was just like felt natural working on it at the time?
It was no, nothing's ever natural. So essentially, my old job was that we provided the software for the states of like a bunch of different states, like New Jersey, North Carolina, a couple other ones. And New Jersey was probably the only one that held out for that long. Like North Carolina, when I left, had upgraded to like Oracle DB, and they had some nice stuff. But New Jersey, when I left, was still like, nah, it's good. We're fine. Don't worry about it. Like, you can still access our data. We can still transmit data to you. We're okay. Until that becomes an issue, don't worry about it. But we were also shipping software on CDs. So you had to like FedEx a CD to a new customer because the software was too old that you couldn't do it any other way. Like, you could try and FTP it to them, but because they're in
2009, it's 2 years away from full-blown cloud revolution.
Yep. Yeah. And so all other apps like Maryland, Virginia was using like web apps, but New Jersey was using like you had to send them a CD and have them install it on their machine in the dealership to use this software. And
To be fair, there are some places in the UK medical places, like medical institutions, where when you ask for your records, they'll still send you a CD right now.
Yeah.
With like your information. And I feel, and I don't know if it's done on purpose, just so you don't like actually access it, or you have to like go back in time essentially to get that information. I don't know why it is.
That's what the NHS knows.
Yeah.
I think this can kind of explain like why a lot of things in the healthcare sector are so expensive, especially stateside, just because there's a lot of technical debt that they need to pay maintenance for, because otherwise things won't work. It's pretty. I don't think we had a single episode so far where technical debt didn't come in as a topic.
That's very true. Yeah.
At some point. So if we're at that point talking about technical debt, what's your philosophy? Maybe Alex, you can add your insights there. How do you balance?
I mean, it's so context specific, right? You know, you don't want to let it keep building up, but you also don't want to sort of shut everything down, say no more sort of forward progress until we clean all this up, because I've seen those just sort of drag on for a long time and not make progress anyway. So I think, you know, it takes judicious work from both the ICs and from managers to say, hey, how can we peel off the places that are really slowing us down and we can get good bang for the buck if we upgrade and fix that, versus like which things are fine to live with. And, you know, if you're not good about that, then you get into sort of the MUMPS situation where you're like 30 years out of date with stuff, right? And like whatever you're using hasn't even been released in 20 years. And that's like a out of control problem. You know, most of the places that we're working at hopefully don't have that kind of technical debt, but you want to make sure you're sort of weeding your garden as you go as much as you can.
Right. So, I mean, my question at this point would be, at what point do we decide that it's time to move on to something that's better? Is it when there is an instant solution that proves to be better available? Because, you know, that sometimes is not possible. Or do we have to like take our time and let it sink in before what's the decision there? How do we make that right decision if we want to kind of avoid that technical debt and still kind of move forward with the trend?
If we don't want to get the mumps.
I mean, I have an opinion about that, which is I've worked at a few different companies that are bleeding edge, where bleeding edge just involves you banging your head against the wall weekly, or, you know, bi-weekly when they release a new minor version or whatever, and it breaks everything because SemVar doesn't exist when you're using like really bleeding edge stuff, because they're like, well, it's in an alpha or beta stage, so like SemVar doesn't exist, so everything's just going to break every time you release something. That's where you don't want to be. If you're thinking what we have today works great, and yes, it's kind of slow, and sometimes developing on the platform takes more effort because you need more, you know, background knowledge or whatever. Staying there is a good option, because yes, it may cost you in engineering hours, but it doesn't cost you in frustration when a new minor version comes out and SemVar doesn't exist and everything just breaks, and then you're beholden to like, I got to roll everything back and keep on this version until you fix this thing.
Right.
That's always been my thing. And with tech debt, it's always that idea of like, yeah, weed your own garden. If you're in a file and you happen to know there's technical debt in that file and you're working on something else, I've always been on the edge of like, hey, if you can fix that small piece of technical debt too, and it's not going to add 15 hours to what you're doing, then do it now, because future you will appreciate the fact that you've cleaned this piece of tech debt for whatever reason. When I managed teams, that was what I always said, was like, hey, if you can do that, then when we have to stop for technical debt, like, okay, we can't put any more features out, we really need to like clean up a bunch of code, there's less of that cleanup time. Maybe you only have to do a sprint and then you're done. That's always been my kind of philosophy.
Sound advice, I'd say.
Yeah.
I worked at a company that we had a week called Mind the Gap every year, where you were just like, hey, if you had like all these like gaps in your code, or where you wanted to like fix some stuff and you never had time to, it was like sort of the whole company was just like, hey, mind the gap, just like fix those and get them cleaned up as you can during this week. Everyone's dedicated towards doing that, and that was nice. You know, you still got to do it a lot during the year too, but that can be a nice way to get buy-in for some things that you otherwise wouldn't have time for to spread.
Awesome. I think these are classic points of advice that people can work with, and I think those are a good leapfrog moment to move to our fourth fact and our last fact for this episode. And I think that fact is yours, Philip.
Yeah, I'll take it away. So my fact of the episode is that two of the biggest developer platforms, so we're talking about GitHub and GitLab, were actually built using Ruby on Rails. Now, it might surprise a few people because obviously it's not the most common probably decision that you would expect to happen. But considering they were built quite a while ago, it was for them the most sustainable and it had the most advantages to actually use that piece of technology to build it and to sustain it. And until this day, they're still using Ruby on Rails to keep everything going.
There's still quite a few companies that use Ruby on Rails in that space. Like Basecamp, for example, they're still on Ruby on Rails. And I think they built Hey, their email platform, still on Ruby. I don't think they moved away from it. It's like PHP,
Shopper.
right? People dunk on PHP all the time, but it's still it's still very good. It's very reliable, very stable. It doesn't shift quickly. Same with Ruby on Rails. There's not a lot of like movement in the actual stable platform, allowing you to build good products without having to worry about like, hey, we've introduced this new API to your JavaScript library that now has made 10 other APIs obsolete. So go ahead and update all of that code. I am not surprised by this fact, knowing that there's so many out there still using legacy technology.
I think Philip was laughing when you mentioned PHP because in a recent episode, and here we're cross-referencing episodes, one of the facts that I mentioned is that PHP is so bad that it has errors in its errors. I won't give the fact here because so people would have to go and listen to it. Sorry, folks. But I do think that PHP does come with a lot of hurdles to using it. And also with like Ruby, I think Ruby is a beautiful language, unlike PHP. But something that always bothered me with Ruby is that mostly it doesn't really have much right of existence, much value of its own outside of the Rails platform. Like in other languages, like Python, you can say syntactically and in structure, it's very similar to Ruby. They definitely they drew inspiration from one another, but Python has a whole world of like, you use Python for data science and for graphics and for machine learning and for web frameworks and a long list of things. And Ruby itself, so that if you're building something for Ruby, you're probably building a web service over Rails, and that's probably it. And I always found it kind of limiting.
So another fact of Ruby is that it's actually been rated as one of the fastest frameworks for building an application. Now, I don't know how true that is, but supposedly it's because of its kind of functional nature, essentially, functional design. I don't know, do you guys have a take on that?
When you say fastest, do you mean like in terms of execution time or in terms of like, this is how quickly like we can implement the features?
Implementation.
I totally believe that. Like, when I was coming up, everyone, like Rails was so huge. And I think also like I think it's a good, I haven't actually done Ruby on Rails, but like I think it's a good framework. And I think, a lot of sort of stuff you're doing on the web is going to be the same. And it really just helps sort of, make you be really productive on that. And then you also just had so much mind share around it where you could hire in a developer and they could immediately be at home in your code base, understanding, hey, here are my actions, controllers, all that sort of stuff, and be productive. So I totally believe that. Again, I've never used Ruby. I was like a Python guy, and I feel like they had super different philosophies, right? Like Python is explicit over implicit, and Ruby's like all this magic metaprogramming like craziness. Like I don't like Ruby for that reason, but like people loved it for sure.
Yeah, I was a Java developer, so no Ruby or no Ruby, no Python for me. It was Java for me, enterprise Java. Yummy.
I remember when I was still at university, one of my lecturers, he was an absolute fanatic of Java. and they ended up writing their own bespoke program that they ended up advertising and forcing all the university students to use. It was called BlueJ. Shout out to any of my lecturers watching this. Well, it wasn't that great. It was just a thing that they essentially, I felt like they lacked the audience, so they just pressured everyone to use it.
Yeah.
That's all I can say about Java. I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Java just comes with a lot of baggage. It's like everything is heavy. Like every line you need to write is like 10 times more tokens that you need to bake into the line. Everything is inflated in memory. It's kind of a massive beast, but sometimes you want a massive beast. Maybe connecting this to the previous conversation that we had, like, do you think there's a point where we need to sunset languages? Because that doesn't, so we talked about sunsetting a database, sunsetting frameworks.
Right.
What about languages? Okay, this language doesn't jive with the times anymore. Someone should put it to bed.
I think that happens naturally. I think like adoption slows, right? And then at some point adoption dies. Or at least adoption dies to the point where maybe they're not maintaining it anymore, and the only people that are on it are people that are stuck in the legacy world. Although less frequently now is what happens is adoption goes down, and then a platform just buys you, and then adoption goes back up. Right, so we look at Remix. That's what happened to them. Their adoption rate was very slow. They got bought by Shopify. Now their adoption is going back up. Same for Gatsby. Everyone thought Gatsby was just gonna finally give up, and then Netlify bought them, and now adoption will go back up, even though they're buying it really for the APIs and everything else, less the framework. I think it just happens naturally over time. Like you'll see less people building on X, and they'll build on Y, and then you slowly just kind of let it go.
So is adoption rate and usage based on the name by the company that created it, or on the actual functionality? Because it seems like if you put a good name to a piece of crappy software that was about to die, it suddenly, has another life.
If you can market it, yeah, of course. Right? If you can market to a developer, then
which is hard,
which is impossible because we don't believe in marketing really. Like we know all the ins and outs of marketing, right? So if you can market like this is a new thing and it's totally different than what we did in V2, and here's 20 reasons why you should adopt us now, and it works, then you should get that bump in adoption and should see a second life. Java doesn't advertise itself as like, hey, we're doing cool stuff, like we're faster than Rust or whatever. Like, they don't do that. They just keep plodding along, and people keep, enterprise usage stays the same. Like that's their corner of the market is enterprise usage. They're not going to try and target new startups. Like no new startup today is going to be like Java. That's the solution. Like nobody's going to do that. So,
There's
I think
some fanatics.
Sure, you'd have to be a very niche startup, right? You'd have to be a fanatic of Java to then build upon that platform. And I think that kind of works in most languages. Like, I don't think you'll see the adoption of maybe C#. You don't see a lot of adoption for C# anymore because people use that like in the banking industry, and that's about it.
Wait until you have ChatGPT built into C#. That's
there you go.
The next
once we get to that
Microsoft.
level, once we get to that level, then maybe the adoption rate will pick back up. But yeah, I don't think there's a need to sunset languages. I think it just happens naturally as we move through, the years.
Can you name a language that has been put to the bin? Because I'm thinking like even like languages like C and assembly, they're like people are still using them today. They're still chugging on, and
I don't think we've gone far enough. I just don't think we've gone far enough in the lifestyle, right? Like if you look at technology as a scale, it's very short. Like people think, like developers it's been around for such a long time, but it hasn't really. Like if you look at the time frame of usage, it's like steam engines. You don't see many steam engines anymore. The only steam engines you see are usually like, hey, it's like this cool thing for, somebody to come and visit, right? Or kids or a relic that you see in a museum. Yeah. like that, we haven't got to that level yet. We haven't gone that far. We haven't done 100 years. Like we're still.
I do want to go now
along.
to like a programming language museum. I think that would
There
be
you
fun.
go.
Yeah, that would be
And-
cool.
That would be cool.
And like
You get your MUMPS
and like you
terminal
have,
you
like-
can go play with and put some data in and out
Look
of MUMPS.
what I did when I was young, kids. Here we go.
and like you have those dioramas like you
Yep.
have in like the history museum where like you see cavemen. So you see now here you can see the PHP developer in its natural environment jogging along. I'd
Listen,
love to see that.
I have to stand up for the PHP developer.
Right.
Another language that I've never written in, but like that community is thriving.
Uh-huh.
Laravel is like a huge deal.
Yep,
I'm
yep.
like that, and they're
Well, maybe
Don't sleep on
PHP will
PHP.
be. Maybe PHP will be one of those languages that will again reignite, and it's going to be the next
Like
big
a
thing.
phoenix rise
Oh,
from
man.
the ashes, and
Yeah.
it did get kind of reinvigorated with Facebook with their re-implementation of it
Yeah.
within their language called Hack.
Mhm.
But I don't know if it's enough.
But like Slack,
s-
I believe is also heavily PHP. I don't know if like how much of it still is, but I think they were another one. But
Yeah.
like truly Laravel, like I would say, especially like indie hacker community,
Mhm.
there's a ton of PHP, Laravel type stuff going on, and then of course WordPress.
And
you
the
know,
government
runs
doesn't
their
do a
unit.
thing, doesn't lift a
Yeah.
finger. All that security budget, all those aircraft carriers, and no one stops this.
All right, so I'm going to slowly put this discussion to rest, but I'd like to end it with a controversy, and I'd love to go around in a circle and get one framework or language from each of you guys that you think you would want it to, like Or said, go for a sunset and be eliminated. Starting with you, James, maybe.
Can I use MUMPS? No. We should keep that one alive forever. Yeah, I think it's very hard. I think if I was going to pick anything today, I'd probably say like low levels, just C. Just get rid of C at this point.
Okay, interesting.
Just get rid of it at this point. There's plenty of other options out there. Let's get rid of C and move on. Yeah, that would probably be my pick. Or MUMPS. Either one. Whichever one you want to get rid of, guys.
Alex?
Oh man, if I was, I'd maybe say Ruby just because again I like the Python mindset, and it's just so foreign to me, some of that crazy Ruby stuff. Or if I was gonna get really spicy, I'd maybe say Rust, just so I don't have to
let's
talk
get
about
rid
it
of
all the
Rust.
time
Ooh,
anymore.
wow.
But I'd really have the people with the pitchforks after me on that one. So yeah.
But why Rust? Like, why do you think?
Well, so I mean, I don't use Rust, but I see everyone talk. Like, people just love to talk about Rust, right? So at least like my Twitter and Hacker News wouldn't be dominated by X,
by
but
Rust.
written in Rust. Yeah,
Too
every
noisy.
time.
Yes.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm kind of getting a vibe of like these kids and their TikTok, schmick talking and Rust talking.
Yep. Exactly.
Back in my
Yeah,
day.
old man yells at Rust.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
I think I just want to input that as kind of a prompt into Midjourney or DALL-E 2. That's what I want to do. That. I don't know.
What about you,
So
Or?
I guess I'll go now. I'm gonna go actually somewhere between James and Alex. And I'll also say C, but for a different reason. And I'll say that I'm very conflicted on this because I really love C. It's really where I got my start. But I think because of security, like too many software issues are resulting from bad pointer management. And that's something that it's just so hard to do in C. And I think maybe it's time we put it to rest. And similar advantages, but solve for the pointer management issue are languages like Rust and Go.
Rust.
So I'm kind of
Knew you were gonna
Rust
say
and
it. Yep.
Ruin. So I'm kind of in a interesting point in the middle there. How about you, Philip?
So as much as I absolutely am fascinated by recursion, I probably have to say Erlang. Because I actually had experience writing Erlang, and it's just absolute recursive hell. Please take that thing off the charts for any programming language, and I'll leave it there. Then, anyway, thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate having you, James and Alex, on with us. It was fantastic to speak to you, and have an awesome day. And I'll see you guys in the next podcast.
Thanks,
Till next time.
Thank
Bye,
you.
See ya.
everyone.
Bye.
I think this is the perfect time to wrap up the show. If you liked this podcast, tell your friends about it. If you didn't like it, tell your enemies about it.